That's right, folks. Today we're going to have a chat about Blood Bowl, an absolutely fantastic game from Games Workshop that has not nearly featured enough in my content so far. One of the main reasons for that is because with Blood Bowl you're painting teams, and often teams of very similar miniatures. With that in mind, it can be a little bit not ideal as content. There's a lot of the same for a very long time. It tends to make longer videos with less variance, less interest, and that's not great for you folks. But there happens to be a team that contains a lot of different miniatures, and with a little bit of smart engineering, I think I've got a way that we can do some cool Blood Bowl content together. So we're going to be painting the Blood Bowl Undead team, which contains zombies, ghouls, werewolves, wraiths, and some kind of flesh constructs. They're essentially Frankenstein's monsters, but I don't think GW wanted to call them that. So what I'm going to be doing is splitting this into 5 different videos for the different unit types in the team. We're going to be starting off this week with the ghouls, and then in the next part we'll do the zombie lineman, and then we'll go through the rest of the 2-ofs until we've got a complete Blood Bowl team that's looking absolutely excellent. This is a doubly interesting commission as well, because I was asked to replicate some of the more sort of heavy metal kind of elements of the box art. The customer wanted this commission to be painted sort of as per the box art. They wanted the orange stripes, and from there we had a chat, and it made sense to do the green perimeter lining, and etc, etc. I won't bore you with the details, it's not worth your time. But the net result of that is that we've got a really fun commission ahead of us, and it gives me an opportunity to split it into a few videos. So the overall plan, this first video will give you a lot of the details of the kind of team colour scheme, as well as a couple of specific things for the ghouls themselves. In the follow-up videos, we won't be needing to handle anything for the team colour scheme, so we won't be needing to talk about the green piping and the black and orange stripes. We'll only be talking about the specific things for those miniatures that we paint. So what's going to happen is this video is going to be the sort of starting point for the team if you want to kind of recreate the colour scheme. Each of the subsequent videos is going to be a bit shorter and a little bit more individually focused on the miniature that we're featuring in that one. So enough waffle, let's get on with it. Let's paint some Blood Bowl Undead. Okay, first up we've got one of the less GWE heavy metal-y parts of the workup. We've got the undead flesh. This isn't the only recipe I have for undead flesh, but it is the one I wanted to use for these ghouls. So we start proceedings with Rakar flesh here. From there we want some really nice cold contrast to deaden this skin down, so we're getting Drakenhof Nightshade all over the skin areas, and we're going to allow some fairly deep pooling here and there, but only in areas where we would want shadow anyway. Be sure to sort of move any deep pooling away if it happens on an area where you don't want a good pronounced shadow. And when this dries, due to the sort of slight warmness of Rakar flesh and obviously the coldness of a blue wash, it brings some kind of cool purpley tones. You get this sort of warmer top end, and then this kind of purpley, slightly neutral kind of mid-tone, and then these blue shadows, and it's really sweet. And we just want to kind of lean into that a bit more now by reinforcing that Rakar flesh. So we'll just thin it down and sort of try and softly feather it back up towards the brighter areas. Then we'll mix some white into our Rakar flesh and start to apply our highlights. Again, with these highlights, we're just going to be looking to kind of push things towards the upper facing surfaces, keep this fairly sort of volumetrically lit. Don't need to be too big brain with it. It's going to be fairly obvious. If something's facing upwards, give it a bit of highlight. If it's facing downwards, don't. And then eventually we're going to hit some pure white to highlight this. And at this point, you might feel like some of your transitions are a little bit choppy. Once you've kind of got all of them in, you can kind of step back and take a look. When you start introducing the white, that's when you're going to find that it's kind of hard to get the blends as smooth. If you want to correct that, just go back to the previous colour that you were highlighting with before, thin it back and use that just to sort of feather into the brighter highlight, and you'll be able to just smooth down those transitions a little bit, get them looking a bit nicer. Once that's all done, this is the flesh workup that we have. I really, really like this. I've been using it quite a bit recently. I probably won't use it for all of the other stuff on the team. There will be a sort of a few variances here and there, but it's probably going to feature again before we get to the end of them though. Okay, we've got to paint some stripes next. There is no easy way to paint stripes. Just be prepared to go in with your black and straighten them back up. I always recommend just painting them in rough first. So I've got some Jacaro orange here, and I'm just kind of chucking them in fairly carelessly. I mean, you know, not completely scruffily, but knowing that I'm going to have to correct them with black anyway, so not being too worried if I make a mistake here or there. And these are the bits that I painted orange. You'll notice there was also a pumpkin helmet on one of these guys, so I painted that in an orange at the same time, but this is everything that we've got so far. And then we want to start to get some really nice saturation into that, so we're going to be introducing Vallejo model color red orange, or orange red, or reddy orange, or I think it's orange red. We're going to be introducing that because it's a really nice sort of super saturated orange, and it will contrast really nicely with Jacaro. So we'll bring it straight down to a glaze, and we'll just sort of plop it into the folds and creases of the shirt where the stripes are, and that's going to get us a really, really nice bit of contrast on the go. The pumpkin is also going to need some special treatment, so a bit of thinned down Mournfang brown to use as a glaze for sort of the lower half of the sphere. Then we'll reinforce that with some Rhinox hide glazes, and at the same time I'm going to sort of pin wash the little kind of butt crack areas between the shapes of the pumpkin. We'll build back up our oranges with some more of that Jacaro orange, just to kind of make sure that we haven't overcompensated with any of our shading. Just kind of bring back some midtones, smoothen some transitions, that kind of thing. And then finally, some pure sunny skin tone is going to form some lovely highlights on this orange, and this will be the highlight that we'll use for all of the orange, so just kind of dotting it about, a bit of edge highlighting here and there, a little bit of feathering here and there. But when it all comes together, it's a pretty tasty orange workup. I actually really, really like this orange workup. I think I'm going to start using it a bit more. Here's what it looks like as a done deal, and yeah, I'm into it. Okay, here's that really heavy metal part now. This is where we're going to have to sort of paint lots and lots of straight lines. There isn't an easy way to do this. Again, it's much like Stripes. It's very high accuracy investment. It's not super forgiving to mistakes. It's a bit of a pain in the arse to correct mistakes if you make them. But, you know, it's part of the look that we're going for with this team. We are sort of doing our version of the box art, so with that in mind, we've got to do it, and I want to do it well. So Warpstone Glow is the first section, nice and simple, just going around and painting straight lines around the perimeters of the armour. For that finer line on the armour though, I actually moved away from Games Workshop's paints. I wanted Necrotite Green from P3 for this. Reason being, it covers a bit better than Moot Green, which is what it's a colour match to. It also goes on a lot smoother. It doesn't sort of dry tip your brush as much. These are two things that are very important for painting fine lines. You want coverage because you don't want to have to keep painting over the same fine line. You want smoothness because you want the paint to go where you want it to go. You don't want to have to wrestle with it. So this Necrotite Green gives us both of those things more so than Moot Green does, which is why it's preferable here. I'm also going to grab some Reaper Alien Goo. This is an example of not preferable, and that's why I'm only using it for these tiny little points. Reaper Alien Goo loves to dry tip your brush. It really likes to dry out quickly. It's got a very sort of powdery base to it. And what that means is that when we're using it here just to do some really fine accent highlights, it's not too bad, but we certainly wouldn't want to have to run lines with it because it would be very hard to control. Okay, anything that's made of wood is going to get a C&2 with some Mournfang Brown. I'm not going to be super detailed in how I handled this wood because there's more wood coming up in one of the future videos on this team, and I feel like that's a better place to kind of handle that. But just to give you a quick idea of what we're doing here, more of that Vallejo model colour, orange-red, mixed into the Mournfang Brown is what's going to form our first highlight. And then our subsequent highlights are going to be a few different mixes of that mixed colour with just additional dots of sunny skin tone added into the mix, built up and built up and built up until eventually I'm dotted in some pure sunny skin tone here and there. So here's what all the small details look like when they're finished. You'll notice that I've done things like there's some straw stuffed into the boots of these guys. I actually joked on Twitter that it was a portion of chips that he'd stuffed in his boot to save for his lunch, but you know, ghouls probably eat more flesh than chips, so it's not that. But if you're curious as to the workup for that straw, again, you know, we'll go into a bit more detail on painting it in a future video because we've got some scarecrows coming up as part of the zombie section, but it is just pure sunny skin tone and Seraphim Sepia. It's a very, very simple workup. For highlighting our blacks, I'm going to use the heather blue method that you've seen me explore a few times in other videos. So we start off with a mixture of black and heather blue, and we start to go around all of the sort of basic areas that we're going to want to place highlights and create this kind of slightly blue-grey foundation for our highlights to build up on. The next step is to take pure heather blue, and we'll start off kind of dotting it into the areas where we want the highlights, but then we'll also need to kind of feather it in a little bit to create some transitions. Black can really demand that you constantly keep giving it more and more attention to get more and more smoothness out of it. It's one of those colours that when we highlight it, getting the smoothness is the hardest part. So just be willing to kind of decide a cut-off point of where you look at it and say, okay, this is smooth enough for what I'm trying to achieve. And then for the final highlight on the blacks, we mix some white into that heather blue to get a sort of paler, slightly desaturated version of it, and we just dot in some fine highlights. Again, we can come back and feather with the previous highlight colour if we're not happy with the transitions, but you know, you get something pretty good looking at the end of it. I'm going to tackle all of the metallics in this with Vallejo Dark Aluminium, but I'm going to be kind of splitting them up a little bit further down the workup. So first of all, we just get them all dotted in with Dark Aluminium. Nice and simple. It's a really easy, full coverage, very, very fluid paint. Can be a little bit tricky to control. You do need to sort of pay attention when you're working with it, not let it get away from you, because it's as thin as a wash, so it will run into channels using capillary action if you let it. But you just get all those metals dotted in. And then where the separation comes in is we're going to shade some of them with Nuln Oil, as you'll see here, but then other areas we'll shade with Agrax Earthshade. So we get a mixture of just kind of, you know, dark, not worn, but sort of just dark metals. I'm really struggling to articulate this point. But then on the other side of that, we get some kind of dirty, actual weathered, battered looking metals with some sort of browny stain to them. It creates a nice juxtaposition of two different looking metal approaches whilst only really having to do one workup, so it's quite a handy little cheat technique. So that takes us over everything that I want to show you for this video. Like I said, you're going to have to come back if you want to use these videos as inspiration to paint your undead team, because we are going to be splitting them down into a number of videos. But for now, here is a little look at what these ghouls look like. And you know what? I loved painting them. Doing anything remotely heavy metal style is kind of outside of my comfort zone. I don't normally do that whole kind of base coat, wash, edge highlight, finer edge highlight. That's not really how I ever paint, and so getting opportunities to do that every now and again is actually kind of super fun for me, and something that I probably should challenge myself to do a bit more. I know for most people that's kind of the normal painting method, because most people get into painting through Games Workshop, and that is the painting method that Games Workshop recommends, so to most people that's like a really normal thing, but to me it's actually a very interesting little departure from what I usually do. So I guess that kind of shows me what it must be like for people who normally paint that way to watch one of my videos where I don't paint that way. Kind of an interesting, weird insight. Anyway, I'm not going to gab on at you. We've got a lot more work to do on this undead team, and we're going to be coming back with some more videos on them very, very soon. So in the meantime, have fun, folks. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to click that like button. You can also subscribe to the channel and enable notifications if you want to stay up to date on what I'm doing here on YouTube. I do have a Patreon if you want to support the creation of the content. That costs as little as $1 a month, depending on what tier you want to pledge to. Gives you access to our wonderful Discord community, along with a load of other cool benefits, so check that out at the link in the description. Right then, that actually is it now, so thank you for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye for now.